Couldn't be more thrilled to have these two brilliant writers here with us tonight. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Alexander and Fatima to the Strand.
Do you have a preference or?
Do you?
No.
Okay. I think you should be over there. So nice to be back in these director chairs.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for spending some time with us tonight. So we were talking a little bit backstage about what this little show tonight was going to do. And so just to prepare you a little bit for the format, we're going to chat for a little bit about the book. Fatima will read, and then chat a little more. She'll read, and then we'll have you guys, we'll open it up to questions from the floor. So as I was reading this book, I was thinking that for myself, even though I try to pride myself on not being so American focused, there were lots of these people that I just did not know.
Yeah.
The entertainers that you're writing about. I was thinking of when I think it's one of the Jonas Brothers got married.
Oh. That's a very sore topic for South Asians at the moment.
Should we start there?
I mean, we can go there, yeah.
And lots of Americans thought that he was the big celebrity in that relationship.
Yeah, we'd never heard of him before.
And it sort of, that was the sense of scale that I felt was being measured in this book.
Yeah.
In a sense, the scale of what is not visible to us. I think, so many Americans, we imagine that American pop culture is the world's pop culture.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think, hi everyone, thank you for coming here tonight and for spending your evening with us. It's nice to see you. And thank you, Alex, for being in conversation with me. I think American pop culture is the world's pop culture, and we've consumed American culture unthinkingly for so long. I mean, I grew up in Syria in the 1980s, and in the 1980s Syria, you couldn't get a lot of things. It was difficult to get certain fruits, for example, because Syria didn't grow it, and it was, an isolationist country. But I could get Eddie Murphy films, and my father had Motown records and listened to Otis Redding. And so while that was true, at the same time, growing up in the global South, you have access to other pop cultures. So on Syrian state television, there used to be a Russian cartoon that would come on every evening at 7 or whatever it was. We had Bollywood films that we would watch. And so we had our eyes and ears open to much more. And that's kind of where the idea for this came from. I think we can be interested in American pop culture, but not deaf to what else is happening in the world. I mean, I'll give you another example that I thought about when I was writing this book. Maybe 10 years, 12 years ago, I went to a part of Pakistan that's up in the north called the Kailash Valley. Has anyone been or heard? Okay. So for those who don't know, the Kailash Valley is very, very northern. You can't access it except for 3 months of the year. It's just snowed in otherwise. When you can access it, you've got to fly to Chitral, and then you've got to drive for a couple of hours to get to this valley. And the people who live in the Kailash Valley, the Kailasha people, are said to be descendants of Alexander the Great's troops who mutinied after the disastrous India campaign, who just refused to go any further, settled there, married locals, and lived. And so the Kailasha people are a really unique people. They follow a kind of paganistic religion that marks the time through the seasons. They're a matriarchal society. So the women control everything about how they live, how they worship, how they everything. And the women are very beautiful and very distinct. They have a very distinct style of dressing. The men are like furniture. They don't really do anything. They just kind of sit in a corner somewhere. And the other thing that's interesting about the Kailasha people is that they are completely cut off. So there's no electricity. There's no satellite connection. There's no television connection. There's no mobile phone reception. There's no landlines. There's no nothing. And when I went to the Kailash Valley, I went to write for a Pakistani newspaper. And one of the elders said, would you like to take a little tour of the village? And she took me around and was showing me places. And she said, do you want to go see one of the craft centers? Because the women also are the ones who work, who earn money. And they do this, beautiful embroidery, and they weave, and they do all kinds of things. And so she takes me to this little room, in this mountainous valley where there's no electricity. And there are these 3-4 women sitting on a floor weaving. And behind them on the wall is a taped picture of Shah Rukh Khan. And so I said, sorry, but if you've got no electricity and no phones and no lights and no nothing, who's he? And they all kind of smiled at me and said, oh, we don't know. But they knew very well who he was. And I thought about that a lot when I was writing this book. You cannot escape certain cultures. And they may be new to the Western world, but they mean a lot to the rest of the world.
I'm curious, what did you discover in the writing of the book that surprised you, even given what you already know? Do you have a new favorite pop star, for example? What does your Spotify look like? Yeah. Do you use Spotify?
Yes. Well, I knew obviously about Bollywood because growing up in Pakistan, there's no way to escape Bollywood. But I didn't know very much about the Turkish shows, dizi. So it was an incredible learning experience for me because I learned so much about Turkey, about television, about Ottomania, about this incredibly fascinating new center for the Islamic world that is modern and traditional and all these things at once in a really peculiar but very political way. So dizi was the greatest learning that I had doing this book. And I went into it, the average Turkish show is 2 hours long, 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And I would sometimes be with friends and, English friends or Italian friends, and I would say, well, will you watch an episode with me? And they would be, oh, fine, okay. And I'd find them 3 weeks later on episode 75, completely glued, because they're really quite nuanced. They're based on literary epics and Turkish literary classics.
Can you say for those who don't know what the term means and maybe some of the
101.
Yeah, a little 101 on it.
How many of you have seen a Turkish dizi? No. Okay. So you can watch them on Netflix. It's probably harder to get them on YouTube because they geo-block them. But a Turkish dizi is not a soap opera. And I was shouted at a lot in Istanbul for us calling them soap operas because they're a unique genre of television. They are very long, as you know. Each episode is like a mini movie. They're based on literary classics. And their storylines go from the Ottoman Empire to present day. So one of the most famous shows is a show called Magnificent Century, which is about Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, who expanded the Ottoman Empire to its greatest point and beat down the doors of Vienna. If Suleiman had conquered Vienna, the Turks would have had Western Europe. And he was stopped just there. And it's a show about the Sultan, about Ottoman expansion, but it's also a love story. It's a story about the woman he marries. Ottoman sultans didn't marry. They just had children with concubines who then were sort of sent out to a province with the child. And he marries a woman called Hurrem, who's a very divisive figure. And so the show is about that. But if you happen to be from the global south, it's not something you're used to seeing because here is a Muslim king who is tolerant, who is wise, who is honorable. They have these great scenes in Magnificent Century at the Vatican, and it's these malevolent old white men, plotting the world's downfall. It's just the complete flip side of what we're used to seeing on television. So that's one of the most popular ones. But other shows are, crime dramas or family dramas. And they're very slow burning, so they take a long time to progress. There was a very famous show again called, in English it's called Forbidden Love. And I was on episode 11 before I figured out whose love was forbidden, because there were so many options. The couple, the romantic couple, their hands don't even touch till episode 25 or something. And I can't do math, but like 25 times, whatever. 100.
Be more specific.
Yeah. But they keep you watching. You're sitting there, 18 hours later. So binge watching takes on another meaning. Wanting to know what happens next. And I think they're really quite remarkable in that sense. Oh, and my Spotify, yes. So I had to watch all of this stuff. When I was watching the Shah Rukh Khan films, I had an Excel sheet where I mapped in how many films does Shah Rukh Khan die before the end, like all of them, in how many films does he get the girl he loves? Never, And then for the K-pop, I obviously listened to a lot of K-pop, and in the beginning I passed it off as research, but to be honest, by the end, I was slightly a fan.
So this was a discovery of yours, this Turkish television show that you discovered in the process of writing the book?
Well,
or did you discover it and then it was around the same time that you were writing the book?
Well, I remember when Magnificent Century aired in Pakistan, I remember it being on, and I remember everybody being hysterical about it, but I didn't watch it. I sort of would pass by the television when it was on, or friends would tell me things, but I knew it existed, but I wasn't watching it. And so I vaguely knew it existed, but I didn't realize its popularity. And so I had to start as a novice. I had to start from the beginning and watch episode by episode, and watch different shows. And so I came to it really like a beginner. But at the same time as that's true, I had no idea how expansive the world was. So when I went to Turkey for the book, I went on to a couple of sets and got really pulled into a couple of shows. There's a really, really good Turkish show called Çukur. I don't know if anyone has seen it. And it's based on The Godfather. Like there's a brother who's like Fredo, like it's down to the Fredo brother. But it's really gripping. And they have a really interesting set of rules, dizi. So there may be violence in dizi, but the hero of the show will never be the employer of that violence. The hero will never hold a gun. And if you're watching American pop culture, I mean, I saw John Wick. I mean, what was that about? I tried counting how many people John Wick kills, and I gave up at 57 or whatever it was, and that was the first half an hour. So that's quite interesting, I think, in the world we live in today, to have a hero who is not the executor of violence. That was interesting for me to watch.
And how do you think that affects the structure of the narrative comparatively? It has to have an enormous amount of effect on, everything from the plot to what we would think of as character development.
It requires a lot more nuance. I mean, it requires a lot more struggle of the characters. It requires a lot more time also. So that's true. But it only adds to the tension of the show. I mean, these are shows of great tension. So if you you are pulled along for 300 hours because they do it so incredibly well. And also they're quite politically engaged shows. So there's another show. I mean, I'm talking obviously not about the show that aired last Tuesday. I'm talking about the big Turkish shows in this book. There was another show called What is Fatma Gul's Fault? Has anyone seen? I mean, you guys have to watch more TV because it's like a really big show. You've seen it, okay? So it's the story of a young
I'm
girl.
already a little bit obsessed just from the name.
I know, it's a great show, isn't it? It's just hit Spanish television, and it's beaten all the American programming on Spanish TV. Like what's it, Big Bang Theory, whatever that show is called, like, which used to be the #1 non-Spanish show, is now out of the picture. Modern Family, out of the picture.
It's so funny what of American shows gets popular overseas.
Yes, I know. Curious.
It is. Big Bang Theory is not. I mean, no
it's not
offense
big here.
to anyone involved. It is.
Oh, it is
actually.
big here.
I just.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither. But it's the story of a young woman in a seaside town, who's a poor woman. I mean, she's an orphan. She lives with her uncle and aunt. They're bakers. Her fiance is a fisherman, and these rich sons of industrialists from Istanbul come to this town for a stag do, like a bachelor party, and Fatma Gul is the victim of a gang rape. And not only is she the victim of a gang rape, but after she survives the rape, her fiancé wants nothing to do with her because now her honor has been sullied. And the family, who isn't they're not her immediate family. This isn't, she has an aunt who's obviously there's always like a malevolent aunt or mother figure. The aunt wants nothing to do with her. She's ruined the family's honor. And Fatma Gul is encouraged to marry one of her alleged rapists as a form of justice. Now, because her rapists are a bunch of rich boys from Istanbul who happen to have a local friend who's a sort of happy but poor blacksmith, they throw him under the bus and say, listen, we have, one of them is going to NYU, the other one is taking over his father's factory, and they say, we just have too much to lose here, and frankly, your life doesn't mean very much, so could you just accept blame and marry this girl and we'll be done with it? And I don't want to ruin the ending, but Fatma Gul is thrown into this marriage. The blacksmith, Karim, doesn't actually remember the rape. He doesn't know whether he was a part of it or not. Was he? Wasn't he? It's like 80 episodes before you find out if he was or he wasn't. And Fatma Gul fights for justice. She doesn't accept her fate. And she fights through the justice of the courts. She fights society's justice, culture's justice. So I mean, these are weighty issues for any drama to tackle, and they do it quite well.
And these are also these are stories that we're not here in America, certainly, we're not otherwise seeing at that kind of that kind of length.
The English-speaking world is the only part of the world that is so far immune to the Turkish expansion. So these shows are really big in South America. They're very big in Eastern Europe. They're now entering Western Europe. So, but Spain and Italy in particular. They're very, very big in Asia, but they're not big here or in England. And when I asked people in Turkey why, they had a couple of theories. One was that English-speaking audiences don't want to go through the reading of subtitles. I mean, you'll do it for like a film, but you won't do it 2 hours, a night. And the second theory they had is that because these are dramas coming from the Muslim world, and even though they're really interestingly staged, so they could be anywhere. They're filmed in Turkey. Unlike Bollywood films, they're filmed exclusively in Turkey. But the Turkish protagonists could be Western, Eastern. I mean, it's unclear, except for the historical epics. Those are very clearly epics centered in the Muslim world, centered in the struggles of the Muslim world. And some people there suppose that might be why they haven't cracked the Anglo-Saxon world yet.
So in this group of I guess, the new kings. There is an old king, which is Bollywood is. That's probably like besides K-pop, probably the most familiar, I would say, to American audiences earlier. Did you have a different sense of how you were going to treat talking about Bollywood in this book, or given, or no? Was it?
Well, Bollywood is interesting, and Bollywood has always been a mirror to Indian society. It reflects the moods and the tension and the turbulence of Indian politics at any given time. So the Bollywood films of the 1950s, when India is a newly independent country, are utopian films. They are films centered on very romantic ideas of nationalism, of brotherhood, of hope and idealism, even though the protagonists, the heroes, are maybe dispossessed and disenfranchised. They have a great belief in what's to come and the possibilities ahead. And then the films of the 1970s change, and they reflect the corruption and the inequality in society at that time, and they're personified. The hero is known from that period as the angry young man. And he's still a socialist, and he's still moved by social justice, but now he's furious. And now he's fighting back against the villains of society, who are the rich, the police, the bureaucrats, And then in the 90s, once neoliberalism hits, like, the hero is not a utopian, he is not a socialist, like, he is a shopper, and he drives a Ferrari, and he lives in London, and he summers in Milan, and he has a watch, and and that's what the films are. And Bollywood today is going through a really uncomfortable moment, I think. It's a really sinister moment, where you've got little more than state propaganda as a subject of Bollywood films. And Bollywood was too big, really, to tackle just as Bollywood. So I write about Shah Rukh Khan, who's one of the big stars of the industry. And he's unusual because he's a Muslim. And in fact, the three biggest stars of Bollywood are all Muslims. And I wrote about Shah Rukh, and I went to watch him film an Egyptian prank show that was going to be aired by a Middle Eastern cable network shot in Dubai. So it was kind of perfect for the book. It had that multi-culti global aspect. And then I went to Peru, where there's a subculture of Bollywood fans. And these are people who don't speak English. These are mainly indigenous Peruvians who come from the highlands. They're part of this great trend of people moving from rural bases into cities. And many million people across the world who are making these moves find themselves unmoored once they get to the city, and are essentially left to their own devices. So I went to spend time with Bollywood fans in Lima. On that note. So I'm going to read you a small section from Lima. I went and met the members of Shah Rukh Khan universe. There are so many fan clubs in Lima. You could, everybody has a fan club. Like even Preeti Zinta has a fan club. Name me 5 films she's done. I can't think of 5, but anyways, she certainly hasn't done anything lately. She's got a fan club. So this is SRK universe. Before we met, Misail, the president, assured me that SRK Universe was not just attracted to the celebrity of Shah Rukh Khan. It meant something to them that he broke the stereotypes of Hollywood, namely that the handsome protagonist has to be a gringo with white skin, green eyes, and blonde hair. They were moved by the way he imparts a love for the family in his films. He touches our souls, Misail told me, and it was their love for the Bollywood star that had cured many of their members of vices. He was not exaggerating. Marlid, a petite 44-year-old housewife with sleepy eyes, was an alcoholic for 20 years. When her mother died, Marlid, a devoted only child, began drinking heavily. In 2007, she got badly drunk at a neighborhood fiesta and ended up in the hospital. When she returned home, a friend brought her some DVDs to distract her. And though she had never seen Cines Hindu, which is what they call it, it inspired her to stop drinking and to change her life. Bollywood helped her appreciate nature, she says, to see flowers, to focus on family and on love. She married several years ago and had a baby who she named Ariane Valentino in honor of Shah Rukh Khan's own son. In her barrio, everyone calls her Shah Rukh after her idol. I don't see Shah Rukh as a man I want to be with, you know? I see him as a man full of values, someone to admire. All of the members' stories follow this pattern of deep despair, lifted only by immersion into Khan's films. Angie, an 18-year-old who works as a teacher in a language institute, has been drafted as the translator for our meeting. And she interrupts her translations every now and then to promise me that she too has a very personal and very sad story. Angie has been calling me since I reached Lima, usually at 7:30 in the morning, to discuss my plans for the day. She bombards me with continual breathless texts to ask what it's like to be a writer, which she'd like to be too one day. She wants to write about values, a vanishing concept in her country. Hang on, no spoilers. They ask if I know Shah Rukh Khan, and I say that I've only met him recently. Could you feel his fatherly love? Angie asks. Though they all profess to admire Khan for his values, culture, and traditions, it is Wadi whose allegiance to the Bollywood star is the most profound. I am hard, Wadi emotes in his deep actor's timbre. Because the men in Peru are macho, men don't cry. But it was watching DDLJ for the first time that Wadi found himself awash in tears. It was a film that made him want to be an actor when he was 17 years old, lost, and on the cusp of suicide. I wanted to study acting to be like Shah Rukh, Wadi tells me. You can be like his shoes, Violetta calls out across the table. I wanted to have just even 1% of his grace. The whole evening at Zentro, Wadi has been goofing around, speaking in Spanish-inflected Hindi, grabbing the women's hands to twirl them in a dance, dropping to his knees to sing and shimmy his shoulders. But suddenly he grows somber. Yo soy un chico de pueblo. Wadi puts his hand on his heart. I am a man of the village. Yo no soy un Chopra. Yo no soy este Kapoor, un chico. I am not a Chopra. I am not a Kapoor. He's been in 8 films, but it hasn't been easy. Here we have no opportunities being Inca, he says, his shoulders hunching. Here there are only opportunities for Brad Pitt. Here, if there's anyone of our color in films, if they have any story where they come for the highlands, then they're stealing money or they're doing something bad. If Shah Rukh Khan had been born in Peru, he would have never been the king of romance. Never. He would have been a poor man.
And now I find that I want a Bollywood film about him called A Man of the Village.
Oh, you know, I've got video. I mean, I wish I could show you this video, but it's probably too late to show you a video. I mean, you can't see it on my phone. I have videos of Wadi singing Bollywood songs. I mean, I was just sitting there looking at him thinking, he doesn't speak English, you know. And he can sing. I mean, he knows more songs than I know songs. You know, he was singing songs I didn't even know were in Shah Rukh Khan films. We had a Shah Rukh Khan impersonator at the meeting, and he gave me a card, and it said, Shah Rukh Khan impersonator. And I said, is this your full-time job? And he said, yes, I'm very busy. And the truth is that everyone I met, and there was this huge culture in Lima. I mean, Campo de Marte is a big park in the middle of the city, and it's filled every Sunday, like filled. Again, I've got video. I wish I had thought of this earlier. It's filled with young Peruvians doing Bollywood dances, and you know it's really incredible. And they're wearing tikas, and I said, how did you find them? And they said, oh no, it's a sequin. I just licked it and put it on my forehead. And they've made saris out of shawls. And the truth is that none of them are white. not one. And not one of them comes from the part of Lima where you might go to the Indian embassy for an event. These are all people who belong to small neighborhoods, struggling neighborhoods. They live in crowded barrios. And they're just devoted fans. And I mean, by the way, there were also, I met this wonderful, wonderful person called John in Lima, and he ran a Bollywood dance troupe. And he also had a film appreciation society. And he was asking me about all these Pakistani films, like, oh, have you seen this one? Have you seen that one? And I was like, yes, I've seen them, but I hadn't. They'd just come out, you know, and he had seen them. It was embarrassing.
Film Appreciation Society could be the sequel to Man of the Village. So we should probably talk about K-pop.
Yes.
I don't even know which end of it to point to. I mean, what's interesting to me a little bit about that is that there's no way, I suppose, for an Incan to go to India to become a Bollywood star.
Oh.
Or is there?
Well, you know what? The truth is Bollywood wouldn't put them in the films.
Right.
Because Bollywood has a certain aesthetic, and that aesthetic is fair and skinny and, you know, tank top wearing, and that's who they want in their films, sadly.
Right. But there is a kind of a whole... there's waves of young people in Asia who go to become K-pop stars. There's like and some of them are trafficked, unfortunately, by really unscrupulous people. But I wondered. I guess it's interesting to me to think of it as a sort of, it's a public-facing thing for Korean society in a way, Korean culture. Even as it is also less and less Korean in some ways because of the way in which it is becoming a global phenomenon, but I don't know. It's
yeah. Well, K-pop is interesting because it's a bait and switch in a lot of ways. They put their success down to something called glocalization. I mean, which to me sounds like a con. It's like global and local. And what they do is they take Western-sounding pop music and they speed up the tempo. And that speed is what makes it dancier. It's what makes it happier. It's what makes it catchier. And Korean is a syllabic language, right? Like English. So it's easy for us to sing along with K-pop, even though we don't know what the lyrics are or what they're saying. And then it's also very strategic. So they will put in a smattering of English words that's just enough for us to actually have something that we can repeat. So, you know, obviously Gangnam Style, I mean, you can't call Gangnam Style K-pop. It's not technically considered K-pop. But there's like 2 English lines. Hey, sexy lady, and Gangnam Style. That's the only English in the song. But when it comes on, like, I mean, and don't lie, like all of you will be singing along to it, like you know all the words without knowing the words. And that's not an accident, that's completely strategic. And so one of the biggest studios in Seoul is a studio called SM Entertainment. And its founder essentially invented the modern iteration of K-pop. And they have this manual called Cultural Technology, CT for short. And it's not allowed out of the building. Like if you don't work for SM, you can't see it, you can't touch it. Like you're not allowed to take pictures of it. And it's a manual for success, down to what a K-pop star should wear in any given country, how they should move their hands, you know, how many members of a group you might need, in which direction they should face the camera. I mean, it's really industrial. It's a sort of factory farming of pop culture. But at the same time, even though it is kind of Western, all the songs are written by Americans today. Like I interviewed an American in Seoul who went out there to teach English to pay off his college debt, and he now is like a mogul. Like he has an entire, he has his own business writing K-pop songs. It used to be the Swedes, you know. All the choreography is done by Europeans. So while all that's true, they're still very Korean. there's a very traditional morality. There's nothing racy or dodgy or anything in the videos. They're all songs you could listen to with your grandmother. Nothing has to be beeped out. Yeah, I mean, don't look at me like you don't know what K-pop is. All of you are K-pop fans. Everyone is secretly like a BTS fan. Everyone says, "Oh, I don't know about K-pop, but yes, I have heard of something called BTS." And that's why it's so popular, I think, because it fits anyone. It fits everyone.
It's that cultural technology.
It's that cultural technology. It is that cultural technology, and it's I met some of the people who went out there, Asians who went out there, and it's really a brutal system. I mean, you in the normal pop culture world, you might just become a star overnight just because someone hears you and that's it. But in the K-pop world, you will go through 5 years of training. Hundreds of thousands of dollars will be spent teaching you how to stand, how to sit, how to walk, how to speak Mandarin, how to speak Korean, how to speak Japanese, how to play instruments before anyone's even heard your name. In the early days of K-pop stars were not allowed to use public bathrooms because they were building mythologies around them. They weren't building stars, they were building idols.
For those who don't maybe know why they'd need to know all those languages.
Oh, yes. For those who don't know, K-pop bands have subunits. So you might have, like, let's say the Jackson 5, but then you will have also Jackson 5M. And that will be a different Jackson 5. They'll just sing everything in Mandarin, and they'll be Chinese speakers, and maybe Chinese. And then you'll have Jackson 5J, and those will be Japanese speakers, and there'll be a totally different set of people, and they'll live out there. And so one of the new bands is a band called NCT, which stands for Neo Cultural Technology. And they're going to have, and this is terrifying, they're going to have limitless subunits. So they're going to have the LA subunit and the Seoul subunit and the Umbrella subunit and the Cats and Dogs subunit. And there's no end to how many subunits these guys will have. I mean, that's horrifying. That's really terrifying, isn't it?
I mean, I kind of want to write a novel about it now, but
that's your next novel, Alex.
It's so beyond, I think, like what William Gibson was thinking about, and yet it's also kind of an outgrowth in some strange way. But that's incredible. Yeah. That is that NCT. That's intense.
Yeah. You could have like NCT dystopia, like anything is like they have no, and there's also no limits to how many people can be in a band. So you could have a band of like 12 people, they all perform some function. Like you're the angry one, and like you're the smiley one, and you're just the curious one, and it just goes on and on and on. But it works. I mean, I don't really understand why it works necessarily, but it does, and it works pretty well. I mean, the only place I didn't hear K-pop was in Seoul. No one listens to it there, but I heard it in Lima, I heard it in Lebanon. I interviewed a girl in Palestine who was a K-pop fan, and she said something so interesting. She said, I don't have to think about what I'm angry about the world when I listen to K-pop. That when I listen to American music, something disconnects me from it, because I know these are people who have something to do with the suffering I endure. And she doesn't feel that for K-pop. It's quite incredible. It was described to me in Seoul also as an anti-imperialist art form, which I think is an exaggeration. I think that was going a bit too far. But yeah, it could be, I guess. Or could not be also.
And so on that cue, a little cultural technology of our own.
Okay. We didn't decide where I was going to stop reading for this one, so we'll make it up as we go along. The line between North and South Korea is one of the most militarized borders in the world, buffeted by armies at full battle readiness. Landmines, armed guard posts, and electrical fences surround the demilitarized zone, or the DMZ. I always thought Run DMZ would be a good K-pop name, don't you think? I mean, I said, oh, boo. I thought it was a good name. I suggested it to people out there, and they weren't impressed. Anyways. North Korea has launched incursions, infiltrations, and raids, but South Korea has terrorized the North with a unique weapon of their own, K-pop. Both Koreas maintain speakers across the 240-kilometer-long buffer, but South Korea's are more technologically advanced and can be heard as far away as 10 kilometers in the day and 24 kilometers at night. In 2015, after North Korea claimed to have tested a hydrogen bomb, the South turned their speakers up high. We have selected a diverse range of the most recent pop hits to make it interesting, a Defense Ministry official announced, noting that the music, including Big Bang's Bang 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 and A-Pink's Let Us Just Love, was not designed only to annoy North Koreans, but to pique their interest in North Korean cool. North Korea, for its part, called the music an act of war and threatened to blow up all the speakers. That's a true story.
What's amazing is that if it really was war, they would have their own North Korean K-pop groups. Oh. That's what they should do.
That's what they should do.
I can't even believe here I am advising them.
But you know what? Kim Jong-un is a fan of K-pop.
Of course.
And K-pop has been used not only to threaten war, but also to foster peace. You know, he famously attended a K-pop concert and was the first North Korean leader to do so, and was visibly moved to tears at the concert. You know, I mean, that's incredible. So, okay, K-pop is silly and we all think it's a bit goofy, but these are industries with consequence, with political implications, and, you know, it's time we take them seriously. That was my book proposal, by the way, to Columbia Global Reports.
And I love the idea also of these different cultural products kind of teaching people how to cry.
Oh yeah, they're very big in teaching people how to cry. They're very big in that. Shah Rukh Khan has a group of elderly German ladies who are like just grannies. They're sort of in their 70s, who go everywhere in the world that he goes, and they just watch him quietly and lovingly from the sidelines. And I asked him, like, why do you think they do that? And he said that when he went to Berlin for the first time, he attended the Berlin Film Festival. And there were like a lot of these grannies like crying and weeping, and he couldn't understand what was going on. And he asked one of these women afterwards, like, sorry, what's going on here? And she said, you know, we feel as a society so tightly wound, and we don't really have any avenues in which to express ourselves. But your films let us cry. Like, your films let us be sad and let us be happy. And like, what are they watching in Germany that they need, you know? I really can't understand, but they're really big there. Weirdly, dizi are not big there, even though there's a big Turkish population. I don't know why.
That's incredible. Yeah. All right. On that note, I think we're going to open it up to the audience for some questions. Is there a microphone walking around?
Yeah,
okay.
If you want to raise your hand, I will do my best to bring you the mic.
Hi, Fatima.
Hi.
I'm from Malaysia, and K-pop is huge in Malaysia.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, the most number of fans come from young women who are all hijabis.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
And it's very interesting. I've never been sure why that is, but if there's a K-pop concert, they're all there.
How interesting.
And so I'm just wondering whether, I haven't read your book, whether you have some insights into why that is. Is it because they are quite asexual, actually? You know, the boys are, it's a bit like the Takarazuka, you know, in Japan, where it's, you know, it's kind of...
Well, you know, that's really interesting. That's a very interesting question. And J-pop, which is the Japanese sort of version of this, is quite racy. So the girl bands are a little, you know, racy. The clothing is quite racy. The dance moves are quite suggestive. And that's not necessarily true for K-pop. I mean, the dress may be a little sort of, I mean, it's not conservative dress for the bands. But the lyrics are certainly very conservative. There's no double entendres. There's no, this is music you can listen to with your family. This is music that's safe for everyone to listen to. And I think that plays a big part of it. It's not music that you need to feel shocked by or shamed by or uncomfortable. They have really wholesome lyrics. So NCT, who was trying to break into America just recently, I think their big song here is a song called Simon Says. Like, like I can't remember now which song it was, but I had a list also of English words in the songs. And I was looking at my list the other day, and it was like, how are you today? Like, you look nice, cheer up, So I think that accounts for it. I think a lot of people in conservative families and conservative countries and backgrounds don't feel embarrassed. They feel included, and that they can be a part of it. And that's the appeal for all these industries, actually, whether it's Bollywood or K-pop or dizi. Did you had a question?
Oh, sorry, I'll be right back.
Hi, Fatma. Excited to read your book. Thanks for speaking to us. I had a question, especially in regards to Bollywood and Pakistan. How do you see kind of the future of that, especially with the current tensions that have been going on since April, and kind of the dichotomous nature of what Bollywood tends to represent and what is going on in the light of Hindu nationalism, especially in terms of certain populations of that country?
Yes. I think that's a very important question. And I think the way I think about it is that today India is going through a really uncomfortable and ugly and what seems like a dangerous moment. And unfortunately, its films have been a part of that wave. They haven't stood to break the wave. And what I find really remarkable, especially if you're looking at India and Pakistan, is that there's no Dalit hero in a Bollywood film. There's no, the heroes are not Muslims or minorities, or they are not people standing up against a government. Let's not even say this government. These are not people arguing for brotherhood in their films. These are films that are following government dictates. They are surrendering to the jingoism and ugliness of the political moment. When you look at the height of Pakistan's cultural output in terms of television shows, for example, that comes at the height of one of the ugliest moments of dictatorship in Pakistan. Zia-ul Haq's dictatorship brutalized the country. And for those who don't know, Zia-ul Haq made the crime, the punishment for theft, amputation. He tried to remove women who didn't cover their hair from reading the news. Zia-ul Haq censored everything. And when he tried to censor the arts, they said no. Actually, no. And they fought. And Pakistani journalists were flogged in stadiums. And Pakistani writers, Faiz Ahmad Faiz was exiled. Faiz Ahmad Faiz is one of the most beautiful poets of the Urdu language, and he wrote searing verses against the military dictatorship. And for that, for Hum Dekhenge, for this beautiful poem, whose title translates to We Will See. And it's all about the fall of tyranny and the crumbling of tyranny. For that poem, he had to leave Pakistan. After he leaves Pakistan, Iqbal Banu, a beloved singer, stands up in Lahore and sings his poem as an act of defiance. Iqbal Banu was forbidden from performing in Pakistan ever again after that. But she did it. So our cultural history is one of resistance. And what I see in Bollywood today, unfortunately, doesn't match that. It's a rolling over. You just have to watch an Akshay Kumar film to know how enthusiastic they are for the jingoism and the rah-rah for war, especially between two countries. And I find that really sad, because art should be a conduit. It should never be used against another people. I saw Razi the other day. Have you seen Razi? I was a bit like, okay, enough now, The Pakistani is always the baddie in the film. Why are we always the villains, These are two countries that share a history, that share a community, that share language, that share food, that share love, that share everything. And it doesn't make sense that you have an entire industry that's not focusing on that, that's focusing on the other side. I mean, I hope it changes. And I think if you think of a film like PK, you know, which was kind of this sort of lovey-dovey moment of we can all get along, from that to now is 4 years? 4 years? 3 years? It's a really short period.
Hi, thank you. I had a comment about Razi. Actually, what I took away from that movie was that I don't think either of the sides were blamed. They were all kind of pointing fingers at each other, and they were both in a very difficult position, is what I thought.
Yeah.
But whatever. My question is that I'm obsessed with finding similarities within cultures, and with K-pop and with dizi and with Bollywood, even with Pakistani film industry. A lot of what I see similar, and I think I wanted your view, and I apologize if this is in your book, but do you think that they are somehow trying so hard to find maybe a stance where they are unique in front of the rest of the world, but also kind of doing the same thing as each other, trying to like come down to family values or like cultural values and like sharing that similarity between each other without knowing it?
That K-pop bands are trying to tread a new path, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will say, I mean, your point about Razi is well taken. I mean, I think the couple is allowed to feel pain for the decisions they're forced to make. But the thing I didn't like about Razi is that there are always stickers that say Crush India. And like, I've never in my life seen a sticker in Pakistan that says Crush India. Like, Pakistanis love and respect Indians. You know, they think of them as their family. So that like upset me. I just thought that's not... But back to K-pop. Yeah, I think that K-pop is aware that they are, it's slightly like the emperor's new clothes, you know, in a sense. But what they're doing with those new clothes is certainly is a futuristic, unique, technologically, industrially unusual thing. So I think that that's true. But at the same time, it kind of follows exactly the trend of whatever is big outside. So it began like the K-pop phenomena of these big studios that kind of come up. They all came up with hip-hop groups in the 1990s, you know, at exactly the moment that you have it appearing here. And then when you have those boy bands here, the sort of NSYNC, Backstreet Boys type stuff, it happens there in the same way. So I think they're great watchers of the market. It's a very capitalistic arena, K-pop. I think they're really savvy about what's peaking and what's trending and where to go. And in that, I think they're ahead of everybody. Well, it's some of it's imitation, but some of it is path breaking. I mean, some of it is really on speed. You know, it's what everyone else is doing, but bigger and better and faster and more intense. Yeah, it's not just mimicry. I think it's unfair to call it just mimicry, but it does have a part of it.
Hi Fatima, this is Nivedita. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm from India and I have a question about Bollywood, but I'm also wondering if this applies to other popular cultures.
Yeah.
But I think in the past like decade or so, we've seen like the fall of the star and the celebrity in favor of the today, Bollywood actors are eager to take on roles as actors, and they're not like those larger-than-life celebrities. Like Shah Rukh Khan's going to be Shah Rukh Khan in every film, no matter what he does. But today, people want to transform into these different characters. And I was wondering if you've thought about this, the cultural impact of this, in the sense that those mysterious stars and the vibe around them, is it disappearing in favor of the small, like...
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I hope it is. I think it is. And I think part of where it's changing is in TV. So there's been a lot of interesting TV coming out of India recently. And the actors of those shows, I mean, not all of them, but by and large, are new faces. So I don't know if you saw Made in Heaven, for example, or shows like that. New faces, new people. These are character actors. They're not, you know, big names from the industry. So I think that's an interesting move. I mean, it's such a good point what you say about Shah Rukh Khan being Shah Rukh Khan in every film. And I'm sure he's also trying not to do that. I thought Rais was a good film where he wasn't Shah Rukh Khan. He was kind of different, and that was unusual and exciting. But I see that happening more in television at the moment than in Bollywood itself. Yeah.
You had one over here.
Yeah.
Hi, Fatima.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We're friends.
Do you listen? You should listen to The East as a podcast. Do you guys know that podcast?
Oh,
Yes,
wow.
that's his
weird.
podcast.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. Hi.
Well, we're gonna talk tomorrow, but
Yes.
I just grabbed the mic anyways. Could we talk about the epigraph?
Oh, okay. Yes.
Because there's a sort of issue of like the epigraph is Ayatollah Khomeini saying it. And I had actually never seen this quote.
Yeah.
And so I'm sort of wondering like why you picked that one. And on top of that, the example of Iran is interesting because it is cut off.
Yeah.
But by choice.
Yes.
Right, and so there's an underlying idea. Same with North Korea, right?
Yeah.
There's an underlying thought that being cut off from the wellspring of global capital is a bad thing. But if you look at the 90s,
yeah.
right. And so if you look at the 90s, like some of the greatest films of the 90s come out of Iran for pennies.
Yeah.
Like they're filmed in 4 days, and like some of the greatest directors. And so the idea of great culture
Yeah.
and participating in the sort of, the absurdity of capitalist, sort of late capitalist culture, which Koreans do, Japanese do,
Yeah.
like all of that is participating in like the machine of capital.
Yeah.
But in the Iranian instance, it's not. I mean, there's not even copyright laws in Iran.
Yeah.
Like so that in some ways I think sort of makes us question like what is culture today? Like are there still national cultures? Can they exist, and can they only exist in this kind of island mode?
God, I just want Sina to answer his own question because his show is so good, and I just want to know what his guest would say about it. But that guest is me, I guess, now. Yeah. So the epigraph is, in a country, the road to reform travels through culture, and it's Ayatollah Khomeini, which I just thought was such a wonderful thing to do, to put that in there. Yeah, I think Iranian culture is true. I mean, Iranian films, especially of that period. I mean, Kiarostami's films. I don't know if you have watched them, but they're just some of the most incredible films ever made, and they come from a period where, nothing. There was, no broadband internet, no ways to stream something out of Iran, nothing. The Taste of Cherries is an incredible film. And they're so intelligent and subversive. And what I was reminded by a lot of the great Iranian films is the same thing that we had in Pakistan under the period of dictatorship, was culture as subversion and as transgression, and writers and directors coming up with intelligent ways of saying things because they had to come up with intelligent ways of saying things. There's an amazing Iranian film called The Lizard. Have you seen that? Marmulak? Has anyone seen that? And it's about a guy who escapes from prison by putting on a mullah's uniform. And then he gets caught in a small town who's waiting for a local imam to come to the mosque. And they see him and think, this is the guy who's supposed to come and lead them. And he's like a petty thief. And he's got to lead the mosque. And it's such an interesting commentary on religion and organized religion. And it's just wonderful. So I don't really know the answer to that, but what I'm curious about, where I think the most exciting culture is coming from places that we assumed are cut off or close to the world, because they're not westernized, because they don't tap into this enormous machinery that just cannibalizes and feeds itself all the time. So while I watch Bollywood films and think Bollywood films are interesting, I think in a way theater coming out of Lahore is more unusual. It's up against so much more, and its language is more poetic and more interesting at the end in the final product. Are there what do you think?
I don't know. It's ultimately like what role does culture play in like any society? And so there's like this sort of Marxist answer, which is like, oh, it's ideological. Like it reinforces the sort of cultural force of whatever world you live in. And so in America, it's consume more all the time, every day, pay it.
But in Iran, it doesn't do that.
No, because it's cut off.
It goes counter
right?
to it, yeah.
And most of it's state funded. It's not.
But it even goes counter to the state.
On top, but it's a national culture for itself, right? So like those, whatever. You can say Kiarostami is making movies for the world in his later period, okay, but he's doing that for money. He's doing that for whatever. But those are still national texts of Iranian filmmaker, and that's because of that kind of I would say, paranoid state formation of the Islamic Republic, of like, get the fuck out imperialists, like, in which we're seeing right now. Like, I've come around on this, is that I think, especially like, I spent a lot of time in Germany, and this sort of idea, and the wall stuff is just the worst crass American triumphalism. Like, David Hasselhoff ended communism in like the American imagination, like, just not true. Like, the fact that like dopey East Germans like David Hasselhoff doesn't mean they supported capitalism. They just like David Hasselhoff. And so in that way,
East Germans had mullets too.
Right, like exactly, like what people like and what they consume doesn't necessarily translate into some kind of like global ideological, but then for us it is, because it has to be wired into our beings, because everything is for sale. Like, our mental real estate is for sale every minute of every day. So like that, I think in some ways, like that commodified model has taken over South Asia, has taken over East Asia, with the exception of North Korea. So that, these days I'm just, I don't know.
Yeah, but it also, Venice Film Festival is like an Iranian film. Cannes is an Iranian film.
Now it's become boutique art house stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's gone full circle, because they're like, ooh, what's this unique gem?
Yeah. Tune in tomorrow for more of this from Sina, but I hope.
And we have time for maybe one last question.
My question could be, first, thank you for this conversation. Both of you, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My question could be applied to any of the three art forms, but it concerns language.
Yeah.
And just to preface, so there's one of my really good friends when I was an undergrad was Nigerian, and there's a huge Bollywood kind of fascination, and there's even a Nigerian Bollywood, as they say.
Yes, Nollywood.
Right,
Yeah.
Nollywood. And what I found interesting was that Bollywood as an export is predominantly Hindi, and that's not at all representative of India. And coming from this idea that like monolinguality could be like a political project, which is being exported or kind of even talked about in India by Modi right now. What were your thoughts about, because you said that like, subtitles could be an issue with the Turkish question, or why is language a barrier for certain forms, but with Hindi it's not as much of a barrier?
Interesting.
Yeah, why do you
today, in fact, my editor asked me, the editor on this book asked me if, is there like a Satyajit Ray figure today in India who's making those kind of films, and, are there films that are channeling a sort of dissenting voice? And I was thinking, and I thought, could it come out of Tollywood? Could it come out of Tamil language, like especially as the Hindi language imposition or this issue with Modi and all? I hope it doesn't reach a point, but if it continues, is that something we might see, that Tamil language films suddenly become incredibly political and a voice to channel? I don't know. It's curious. I love your socks, by the way. They say skepticism on them. I'm embarrassed at the socks I own now, but I don't know. In fact, what was interesting with the Turkish example, since you mentioned it, is that part of the reason we have Turkish shows on Netflix and they became a global phenomena is because they went to the Arab world first. So it was a buyer for NBC, which is a Middle Eastern channel, that bought a Turkish show. And one of the genius things that he did was they didn't run them in the original Turkish. They dubbed them. But Arabic, you have uniform modern standard Arabic, and then you have dialect. And the dialect they chose was the Syrian dialect. And this is pre the Civil War. And part of the reasoning was that the Syrian dialect of Arabic is considered the most beautiful. It's considered really poetic and beautiful. But also, you had a great artistic culture in Syria. So television, satire, dramas, theater were always very big in Syria. They received a lot of money from the state. They were very respected. So you had great directors, great voice artists, and things like that. And so it's the Syrian language that essentially allows former Ottoman colonies, Arabs don't really like the Turks, they have this sort of bitter hatred for them. But it's the Syrian language that allows them to absorb Turkish shows, that makes it palatable. And you go anywhere in Syria or Lebanon, and people will immediately, they'll say, we're not Turkish, we're separate, we have this. And I'll say, what are you watching today? And they'll say, I have this wonderful drama, it's from Turkey. And they don't really see a difference, And part of that is this simple thing as what dialect they chose. If they had chosen Saudi dialect, like I don't think they would have gone anywhere, because people's political position to the Gulf is so different that it would have just interrupted the process. Yeah.
Thank you all for your questions. Sorry, we do have to move on to the signing. But thank all of you for your questions. Alex, thank you so much for being here. And Fatima, thank you for writing this book.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex.